This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
Do your analysts are at the Port of Montreal, they analyze the containers using statistical methods to determine if those containers might contain stolen vehicles. Is that correct?
That's correct. We have investigators that are at the Port of Montreal every day working collaboratively with CBSA and Montreal Police Services and the RCMP. Our analysts or analytics team is across Canada, and they work remotely, running statistics and analysis to support confirming that the vehicles in the containers are in fact stolen vehicles.
Now, is it true that your analysts were pulled out of the Port of Montreal in January of this year? Were there analysts removed from the Port of Montreal?
No, we have investigators that are present in the Port of Montreal, and no, they work quite collaboratively with CBSA and police services. That's not true.
So you didn't have analysts there before that were pulled out in January? Okay.
No, that's not correct.
Thank you for that. Just curious.
Okay.
My next question is to Carfax Canada. We know we're dealing with Bill C-27 in another committee, and there's a lot of issues with privacy with that, and we, of course, know that VINs, vehicle identification numbers, are part of that. Do you have any concerns about Bill C-27 and VINs? Is there an impact on that we should be aware of in this committee?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Definitely concerns. The proposed bill, as it stands today, is very unclear as to whether or not VIN is going to be considered classified as personal information. I think you've heard from all three of us that the importance of VIN and the data that is associated with a VIN, not with an individual, is critical in combating not only vehicle thefts, but fraud in general. And so we continue to take a position that VIN is not personal information, and obviously working with other committees to get clarity on that.
Thank you for that. And what does Carfax do? You know, because a lot of people, we're all talking about the vehicles that are being exported primarily through our ports. But a lot of people would know that tens of thousands of these stolen vehicles are having cloned VINs, are being resold in Canada to unsuspecting consumers in Canada. It just seems to me glaring that in our country, you know, you can have people with all the VINs and all the insurance paperwork that you need for a vehicle, that people are unknowingly buying stolen vehicles in Canada. What is Carfax doing, and what can the government do to help ensure that Canadians aren't purchasing stolen vehicles unsuspectedly?
Thank you for the question. Access to data is critical, so we have an entire team that's out in the market, always generating additional data points for our report. The more comprehensive the data is, the easier it is to detect these cloned VINs, and most of it's done through a sequence of events of vehicles registered in Ontario, and a day later it's registered in, or being attempted to being registered in British Columbia. Vehicles in an accident in Saskatchewan, in a very short duration later it's trying to be registered in another province. And so for us, access to data, the more data that we have on the report, the easier it is to detect these cloned VINs. And then for us, it's the general awareness through work with our partners, working through our brand team to make sure consumers know the importance of running a vehicle history check. And we believe that we are instrumental in preventing the exchange of some of these vehicles into consumers' hands by catching it at the trade-in phase or at the dealership's lot before a consumer can purchase it.
Thank you. My next question from Ms. Power. I'm sure the insurance industry, you know, is frustrated by the amount of claims that are being paid out, $1.2 billion, I think, last year. And surely, you know, as an insurance industry, I'm sure you're looking at all the factors. And one thing that we've seen consistently in the news is that the people who are being apprehended stealing these vehicles are often people that it's not the first time that they've been apprehended stealing a vehicle. They might have even been to prison. They might even be on bail in some cases. Does the Insurance Bureau generally support creating tougher penalties for people who are caught stealing cars multiple times?
Thank you very much for the question. Generally, we think that all options should be on the table to be explored to help combat auto theft crisis. In addition to looking at stiffer penalties for the criminals doing this work, we're also advocating that we invest resources in prosecuting resources. We've seen that done in Ontario, and it has been helpful to making sure that these are actually working through the court system, and that will send a very significant message through those criminal organizations.
Well, and thank you for bringing up the point about funding the court system, because I think, I feel the frustration of the Canadians when they saw, I think it was just last week or 2 weeks ago, that because of court delays in this country, that people who had been waiting waiting with charges on them were allowed to walk free under the Jordan's principle because the court wasn't able to try them within a fair amount of time. And I think Canadians are very frustrated because we're, one, not catching these people who are committing the crimes as much as we need to be. And two, when they actually are being caught, we're not even hearing their cases in a quick enough manner, and then they're just walking free. And are you frustrated by that when you see that happen?
I think the key part is to invest more into the resourcing of these prosecutions. It's important that the system works the way that it's supposed to. But again, I think that all options on the table to reduce auto theft, be that from stiffer penalties to investing more resources into prosecution, need to be explored, because unless we're looking at all of these options, this issue is not going away.
I want to bring a rural dynamic into the conversation, and I would note, I believe it was about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, that the insurance industry and others declared that auto theft was a crisis. Yet back, I know it was motion 167 in the 42nd Parliament on rural crime, talked extensively about rural auto thefts, and although you both noted kind of in the periphery of your remarks about the dynamics associated with export versus more domestic challenges, and I know chop shops is a big issue in rural Canada. So I'm just curious if you can comment about how we can crack down to make sure that it's not just the vehicles that are being tracked down, but also if they're being sold for parts and broken down in that way, because that's obviously a significant part of the conversation.
Thank you for the question. So yes, there is a small percentage of the vehicles that are actually being chopped up for parts. I think, the most significant is the catalytic converter. And so the catalytic converter has precious metals embedded in it, and when the value of those metals goes up, those become more valuable. And so we've seen thefts of vehicles to be chopped up for parts, or we've seen just the catalytic converter really cut off the vehicles, and we've seen mass incidences of that where they will go to leasing companies or dealerships and just cut off all the catalytic converters. I believe it's the province of Manitoba had implemented a law that has been quite effective there that we would encourage the other provinces to look at. And really what it is it's akin to a know your vehicle bill of sale kind of documentation. So another analogy would be a pawn shop. When you go to sell something at a pawn shop, you have to show ownership. You have to show some details around the vehicle and how it got chopped up for parts. That's being applied to salvage, to the salvage industry, wherein if somebody drives up with a truck of catalytic converters, they have to have a bill of sale for each one.
If I could, and I apologize, it's we only have a short period of time, although I would welcome you all. Please feel free to follow up with the committee if you have specific recommendations or further evidence you'd like to submit. And note in those submissions that it can be distributed and made public as well. I've heard from a host of constituents. In fact, I have an email in front of me about how a constituent talks about a known criminal attempting to steal this individual's truck, stole his neighbor's truck in a rural area. They had camera evidence, but it wasn't seen to be quite enough, and the talks about this whole just a reign of terror of these known petty thieves that are stealing vehicles. And you talked about in your opening statements about the cost that this has, and that it's not a victimless crime. Not only does it terrify and victimize and traumatize in many cases the individuals who have seen significant violations, but also this is a significant impact on the cost of living. Insurance rates are not included in the inflationary index, yet we're seeing significant increases in the cost of insurance, which is, of course, an essential part of anybody in our country, a large country, and being from a rural area, we don't got public transit, so you have to own a vehicle. So I'm just wondering if you can share with the committee how we reconcile that there's an incentive to make sure that vehicles are not stolen. There's an incentive to make sure that these thieves, in many cases on bail, in some some cases, stolen a vehicle, get arrested, and the same day go back and steal. I could point to a number of examples. Same day, they're back out on the street stealing more vehicles. What's the picture here to make sure that we can deal with it so that ultimately Canadians can save insurance costs? The cost of vehicles over the last couple of years up 20%. That's a massive cost and contributor to inflation, not tracked according to the government's numbers. But I'd like to hear your feedback about how we can stop this to ensure that ultimately Canadians aren't having to pay the price for the host of circumstances that are leading to massive increase in costs.
Thank you very much for the great question. So in terms of the cost, perhaps I'll just start there first. $1.2 billion last year, and this is in addition to a number of other costs that we've seen increasing across the auto insurance industry. Your vehicle, our vehicles are all becoming much more expensive to repair, and so the industry did look at ways that we could mitigate the impact of this on our own, prior to, of course, the great collaboration that we're seeing now. And so some of the ways that we did that, we incentivized the installation of aftermarket tracking devices so that when your vehicle is stolen, we can see where it is, we can get it back for you. That, of course, will have a reduction in costs. These can be upwards of $500 to install, and we've been, a number of insurers have been waiving that fee or incentivizing folks to do it, or not charging the surcharge you may have to pay if you have a high risk vehicle. So that's some ways that we're trying to incentivize. We're also making sure that we get out consumer information to customers at the point of sale, including, you might want to install a bar on your steering wheel. You might want to put your key in a Faraday bag, and we've been incentivizing giving those away as well. So we are very much trying to do what we can on our end to incentivize and limit the impacts on theft. I think from what we can do altogether. Again, it's not just going to be sort of one government and one solution, but with the federal government's action plan, we do implore you to look at all options available to you, from stiffer penalties, resourcing prosecution, reprioritizing CBSA towards auto theft, the 72-hour rule. Those are critical. Provincial, investing in enforcement teams, and revinning. And I'll stop there because I see we're at time. Sorry.